All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Swing State podcast. Before we get started, I just want to make a brief announcement. As you realize probably now, Adarsh will not be joining us for this episode. He's currently traveling, but rest assured, I am probably going to be able to cover his talking points. That aside, we got some pretty important news today to talk about, really a lot of implications for the current U.S.-Iran war. Currently, right now, the U.S. and Iran are essentially scheduled to sign what is considered a memorandum of understanding. This is scheduled to take place on Friday, where they will sign essentially a peace agreement to end the hostilities in the Iran region, with a path forward of 60 days to kind of reach a hopefully full scale peace agreement to address all the various issues that have kind of plagued this conflict really from the start. So, just to give a very, very brief background, because we've covered this in a previous episode, the U.S. has been engaged with Israel and Iran since February, really. So a couple months now, various strikes, no actual ground troops yet deployed, thankfully. And the U.S. has given various reasons for our strikes with Israel on Iran, addressing nuclear enrichment, possible regime change, the ballistic missile program that Iran has. But as we know right now, there's current a preliminary peace agreement, and this one signed on Friday would make that official. So as of right now, this memorandum of understanding addresses a few major points. So the first one is obviously reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Currently, there's a double blockade between the U.S. and Iran. Iran is blocking all of the commercial shipping, and the U.S. is blocking all of the military vessels from Iran itself. This has caused gas prices to skyrocket for Americans, and this is really a huge reason why the war is extremely unpopular, according to all the polling. The second thing is going to be having Israel withdraw from Lebanon. So currently, Israel has their forces in Lebanon attacking Hezbollah. And as you're going to find out through the various reporting, is that Israel has actually not confirmed that they're going to withdraw their troops from the region. So this has been a main problem, right? There's reporting from one side, contradictions from the other. We actually don't know really what's going to be going on at the actual signing. But this is one of the main sticking points that Iran wants Israel removed from Lebanon. And then obviously the long-term goals that Iran will have to pledge to support will be no enrichment, addressing the ballistic stockpile, addressing their enriched uranium stockpile as well. Other than that, the U.S. has pledged to unfreeze Iranian assets in the region as a trade-off. So those are the big provisions in the bill, in this agreement. I kind of have my own opinion, but I want to give you a chance from the Democrat side, who I might think are hesitant to give Trump a win. Would you consider this a win at all, or what needs to go forward for this to be kind of a victory for the administration?
I mean, here, fundamentally, if we're ending a war, that's a win, right, for our American troops. And I don't think that any Democrat's going to be against that. I think that, of course, as you mentioned, this is an MOU and this isn't anything specific regarding the nuclear stockpile or any sort of kind of restraint. This is just simply making a decision that, hey, we have 60 days from now, or once the ceasefire is over, for us to figure out what this nuclear agreement is really going to look like. And I think after those 60 days are over, we're really going to be able to tell, do we have a long-term solution to the situation at hand, and to really making sure that Iran doesn't continue to stockpile nuclear weapons and continue to build out nuclear weapons. I do think that any sort of ceasefire, I know there was one that kind of has already started, and any sort of deal that gets made should be acknowledged as a win. I support the Trump administration for facilitating that. I want to make sure that our listeners are aware that the previous deal that was set in place by Barack Obama was very, very strong, extremely strong, and was beat down immediately upon Trump's entering into the office during his first term. And my question of victory is simply going to be whether or not we can keep the same terms of that deal or not better. That's going to be what I would claim, or what I would say to Trump is truly victory, because he has been touting the fact that there's maximum pressure on Iran to stop the nuclear stockpile, but that's just simply not correct. So that's what I would claim as a victory for the Trump administration.
Yeah, I partly agree with that assessment. I really think, we can obviously go back and forth on were the reasons for this strike being justified, or this, conflict being justified. But at the end of the day, as long as we just stop and just get out of this region, new wars, right? This is the America First foreign policy, principle, right? I'm super happy to give the administration credit for doing that. But I agree. I think, the JCPOA, like you mentioned, it was strong, but there are definitely, drawbacks. And, there's kind of two camps. It's either you sign the DCPOA, and then over time you address those problems. And the other camp is no, we need to throw it out and restart from scratch. I can kind of see both arguments, right? Trump's argument is if we don't scratch it, then there's no incentive for Iran to basically renegotiate the terms to make it stricter, right? They're going to say we already have an agreement. Why do I need to, go back and make it harder on ourselves? So I don't really know how, convincing I find that, because to me, I'm thinking, okay, first off, the TCPA, the main thing is it capped enriched uranium at 3.67%. This is way, way lower than Iran's current enriched, facilities can bring it up to, which is 60, which is 90% of the way to weapons grade. So that's a huge, huge benefit to the GCPOA. The main problem, though, is obviously the sunset provisions. Over 10 to 15 years, various provisions of that agreement were set to expire. A few of those, right, were the amount of centrifuges that Iran can have at Fordo and Natanz for uranium. The actual cap on enriched uranium is set to expire. So that whole argument is if we don't address it now, over time, they're actually going to break out, is the term that they use, and be a nuclear weapon state. Again, I don't know if I find that convincing. Obviously, I think if it was up to me, I would prefer to stay in and obviously address those later on. But yeah, I agree. If the administration wants to call this a victory, to me that means either the JCPOA plus further restrictions, or to me what ideally would be you actually do get 0% enriched uranium, like not even anything. The fact that 3.67%, which you could use for civilian energy, I don't trust the Iranian government enough to allow them that capability, because I think even though they undergo IAEA compliance reporting, I think we have to admit, right? And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm firmly believing that there are clandestine facilities or operations, because if I'm the Iranian government, there is no shot I'm actually going to, give up all leverage and, comply with this reporting, because from my standpoint, I don't trust the United States. So why would I actually tell them all of my capabilities for enriched uranium? I don't trust them at all. And that's, to me, has always been a problem. It's this possible clandestine stuff that I believe the Iranian government are complicit in. And I don't really know how to address that unless you have a full ground scale invasion, which I don't agree with, for the record.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think showcasing a victory is for the Trump administration. If he wants to take it as a victory, go right ahead. Like at this point, we're working towards a deal. Hopefully over the next 60 days we see a deal. I think that zero enrichment doesn't seem as plausible as one can hope, but I think that's something that we just need to recognize, that any deal at this point, even a worse deal than the JCPOA, is better than no deal. I don't want ourselves to be in a situation where, because of Trump's ego or because of somebody's ego on our side, we don't have any deal on the table and they can continue to be doing whatever it is they may be doing without any sort of monitoring and without any sort of, intervention on our part. And so that's something that's concerning to me. And I'd rather have a deal on the table than nothing, even if it means that it's lesser than. But I also want to make it clear to our listeners that the deal was strong. And I think one of the major contingencies or downsides of the deal was the timeline. There was a timer, there was a sunset timer on most of the elements of the deal. I was 15 years, and that was one of the primary reasons why most people on the right were anti the JCPOA and why Trump himself was also anti it. However, I do think that if we need another timer, let's put it on. Let's just make sure we have a deal that's safe, that creates safety for the American people, but as well as for the people around them.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I just think it would be pretty ironic if we had another sunset provision, another 10 to 15 years. But, like you said, I agree with that. And as much as I do find it ironic, I would be happy with that. But I'm curious, when I say, and I truly believe this, really do think there are, I think it would be unreasonable to think that there aren't clandestine facilities, right? I mean, even the geography of Iran, it's extremely mountainous in some of these areas. It's hard to access. This is why some of, like, even our most capable and sophisticated bombers have a hard time actually penetrating the deep underground facilities and the ones that we know about for Tone Dots. But do you think, when I say that there are clandestine facilities, do you think that's unreasonable, or do you think that's a definite possibility? Because if there is, then that means we have to address that at some point, right? If that means we can't even take this deal if there is one at face value. So I'm just curious if, that's a reasonable take in your opinion.
I think, I mean, you have to separate, yeah, from my personal opinion, I think there is very likely, clandestine facilities within Iran that are working towards creating better ballistic weapons, like further developing their military capabilities more than anything that they are showcasing to the world. I mean, we do it ourselves, you know? So there's no questions asked that they do it, and if not, every other country in the world does it. The reason why we're specifically talking about Iran is because they provide us one of the largest threats, and they aren't nuclear as of yet, so we have a way of stopping them. However, I think that there's not much we can do to stop them from further developing these clandestine facilities than getting rid of their current uranium and making sure that they, at least at face value, don't produce more. And that is with a deal of any kind. You know, I mean, I think that with diplomacy, you can only go so far. And I think we need to go as far as we can with it to ensure that we are protecting ourselves to the most of our abilities. And then we have to make sure our intelligence on our side is monitoring as much as possible their situation in the Middle East to ensure that we are keeping ourselves safe to the best of our ability. I think that's just fundamentally it.
Okay, I mean, and honestly, that's why I said before, I think the only thing that would actually confirm this is if we actually had troops on the ground across the entire
Yeah.
region, which I'm absolutely opposed to. I mean, I can't think of anything worse, in my opinion, from a foreign policy standpoint. So I think that's reasonable. I guess then that I would be okay with that trade off. I mean, we can't, be aware of literally everything that do during 24/7, right? We have intelligence in the region, but I mean, that only goes so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I would be okay with that. And yeah, I'm hoping this gets signed on Friday. Obviously, we've heard in the past, these agreements are going to be signed and then they don't and they fall through or they adjust things that aren't actually in the final version. So I'm really hoping, in 60 days, even after this, that we can get a full agreement that addresses a lot of these other issues. But I mean, that's going to be a whole nother issue. And obviously, Israel has their own, motives being our ally in the region. I think if we are coming to an agreement with them, with Iran, that is to say, and Israel is not at the negotiating table or feels like we are leaving them out and currently leaving them vulnerable, that could cause problems. I think that they could potentially derail the issue, as we've seen with strikes in Lebanon over the weekend, and them also reporting themselves that they are not planning on, withdrawing from Lebanon. So again, have to maintain that Israel is a huge actor in this as well. Obviously, we were striking with them, and we had mixed reporting on whether that was because they were striking preliminary or we actually agreed to do it with them. So we don't even know really the full story there, but we're just going to have to wait and see. So you know, basically, as long as we get, in my opinion, anything up to the JCPOA plus further provisions, either no sunsets, so it's permanent, 0% enriched uranium, addressing the ballistics missile stockpile and addressing the uranium stockpile as well. And I think actually what I would consider to be even going further with that is further condemnation of their plutonium reprocessing. Because a lot of people focus on uranium, but they also had a plutonium reprocessing plant for plutonium missile warheads, which was also disbanded under the JCPOA, which is good. So as long as they further commit to doing that, I think that would be good. So yeah, we're going to see on Friday if anything is going to transpire. But as of the moment, this is kind of how things look, and we'd be pretty happy if we can get a ceasefire. I think that would be good for most Americans. That I think that would also shore up the president's approval rating because this has been pretty detrimental to his image along with other Republican images.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to also mention on a side note that, the FIFA World Cup is happening in the United States and Mexico and Canada. And one of the biggest things that the Iran team has been facing repeatedly is questions about the conflict. In fact, they had to move their base camp from Arizona to Tijuana because of, the conflict. And so with the United States. So it's something on everybody's mind. I do also think that this could be a reason for why there was some expedited conversations with the president, but it's something to keep in mind. It's on everybody's mind, especially with the World Cup happening right now. And like Eric said, I do hope that within the next 60 days we can see some real meaningful progress happen.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. But I mean, to me personally, I think the major factor is this is just really, really unpopular. And I'm not sure as much of an investment that the administration has in the midterms for the GOP, given that, President Trump is terming out. But if you can't get the base on board, because this is really, in my opinion, split the base, because this is to a lot of people a direct rebuke of right, the American first foreign policy, which is no new wars, no involvement in the Middle East, right? We're not going to do the same thing that we did in Iraq or Afghanistan. But again, we are once again engaged in the Middle East. To be clear, that isn't to say that Iran is not a major issue because these things do need to be addressed. I'm not going to say that, speaking for the American First Coalition, that this is not something that we can just ignore, but a full scale, a strike or an invasion is something that I don't think is in the best interest. And like I said, is a lot of conservatives are against. So we'll see how this moves going forward. But we'll be keeping an eye on it and continue to monitor the situation. Hopefully, only good news now going forward in the Middle East.
I will say from my perspective, I'm not particularly unhappy about having intervention in the Middle East. I'm unhappy with the way the intervention occurred. I think diplomacy is the best way to have intervention. And I do think that we do need to be mindful of the powers of the Middle East. And I think peace in the Middle East equals peace in the world. And so there is I'm not going to say that I support this, no intervention, no action in the Middle East. I do vehemently oppose troops as much as possible in the Middle East. I think that our American soldiers need to stay at home, and we should not have troops on the ground unless absolutely needed.
We agree with that.
Yeah,
We
and
are in
so
agreement.
just wanted to make sure that that is clear and on the record, that I do think that a continued stronghold of American foreign policy is valuable, making sure that we do it in a diplomatic way as and when we can.
Yeah, I just want to make it very clear, right? It's not like Iran is completely strong arming us, right? I mean, look, they have inflation of 50% and they have billions in frozen assets. They don't have access to the global banking sector, which is crippling our economy. It's not like, and they've also been bombed to hell. So it's not like we are like completely have zero leverage here. You can get some good agreements, good provisions. So when people, I feel like, on the left are like, oh my God, they've strong armed us. We have no negotiating power. It's like, okay, let's be real. There are a ton of problems that Iran is facing as a result of this, that we do have power. So it's not like this deal is going to be auto one-sided no matter what it is.
No, no, of course, of course. I mean, hyperbole happens on both sides. It's important to address and make sure that we are not using blanket statements and being very specific with what we're saying and when we say it, because you're 100% right. In no way is Iran trying to choke us out. Like we do have the upper hand. It's just how much are we willing to do without setting something very, very bad in motion. And so it's making sure that we are mindful of that and playing the game efficiently, properly, diplomatically. One question I have for you, Eric, is how does this deal impact our listeners? Like what are the listeners going to feel at home after the deal starting today or
Yeah.
once the deal is signed?
Well,
Afterwards.
ideally, the most immediate impact will be if you have a car that takes gasoline, you will hopefully have cheaper gas prices because, if you do reopen the Strait of Hormuz, you will see an influx of supply in the gasoline market, and that will drive down prices, hopefully. So immediately, that will be the number one thing. And again, since that's so immediate, that's a huge reason why this is pretty unpopular. Right, gasoline was like plus 17% in the most recent CPI report for inflation. So that's going to be the most recent thing you'll notice if your car takes gas. Other than that, can't really say you're going to see too much difference, right? I mean, I don't really know unless you're in the banking sector. Iran might eventually be off the no foreign transaction list, but other than that, most listeners are just going to see prices at the pump decline, which is a good thing. But other than that, right, just the assurance that there's peace in the Middle East, that you're safe from, Iran having a nuclear weapon. So I'm being kind of hyperbolic, but hopefully in the long term that's true.
Yeah. I mean, there are quite a bit of other materials that are also held up in the Middle East right now, because of the Strait of Hormuz. So you'll see additional goods also be decreased in price. Paper, for example, is one of them. But for the most part, your biggest wow moment will hopefully be when you go to the pump and you aren't paying the obscene prices you're paying right now for gas in
Yeah.
America.
I don't know how much it's going to affect California's gas prices. I'm $6
Right.
a barrel almost, but
Right.
that's a conversation for another day. I'll leave my criticisms to the California state government aside for a moment. But yeah, anything else? I guess, like I said, we'll keep taking a look at it, and if anything happens, we'll probably have another episode talking about the full comprehensive deal if we do get that eventually.
Yep. I think that's it.
All right. Well, sounds good. I appreciate everyone listening to us today. And if you have any questions, comments, please leave them in the section. And yeah, we will see y'all next time.